Good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth. Our meeting date is Monday, June 3rd, 2024. I'm Mayor Todd Kasenberg and I'll call this meeting to order. I ask the clerk to note the starting time for the minutes as 7 p.m. A warm welcome is extended to councillors, staff, delegations, and observers who will participate in this meeting, regardless of whether being physically in attendance in the council chamber in Listowel or being connected through web technologies. We begin tonight's meeting with the playing of O Canada. Those in chambers, as able, are invited to stand. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe peoples. We wish to recognize the long history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and show our respect to them today. We recognize their stewardship of the land. May we all live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship. Tonight's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after the meeting as an archived video. To those who are viewing this meeting via the YouTube channel, a warm welcome to you. To those present in the gallery today by attending a public meeting of the Council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and/or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances when deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and/or unacceptable behavior and/or comments. Thank you. I invite, as always, decorum over the course of the coming meeting. You can see that all councillors are in their seats in the council chamber in Listowel. Let us move to item 5 of our agenda, pertaining to pecuniary interest. For the benefit of those unfamiliar with our council practices, provincial legislation requires councillors with a potential pecuniary or financial interest in any item at the council table to declare this interest and to remove her or himself from discussions and voting on the item. In accordance with recommended protocol at this time, I invite all councillors with a perceived pecuniary interest, including those who have declared in writing already, to verbally advise the chair in public session and to submit documentation to this effect in writing to the clerk. Councillors are further reminded that should a potential conflict arise during the meeting, they may so declare and act at any point in the meeting. Colleagues, the floor is yours. Any of you wishing to declare an interest in a pecuniary matter in this meeting? Okay, I'm not seeing any indication of same. My role as chair prompts me to manage the flow of proceedings tonight and largely in accord with our agenda. We usually do have some participating remotely by web conference. I believe Mr. Garland is remote tonight. Should they wish to speak, they may draw the attention of the clerk to this using the conferencing technologies text chat function. I'll find my words. If technical difficulties arise for remote participants, we'll certainly advise them and send what help we can. Let us now focus on the people's business. Part of this focus is achieved when those in chamber silence and put away their mobile phones. Regarding item 6 of our agenda, I have a resolution for our consideration to approve the agenda as follows, that the agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. Can I call for a mover on this? Moved by Deputy Mayor Kellum, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. Okay. Councillor Rothwell records a manual in favor vote. And with that, that is carried. Thank you. Let's move forward to item 7 on our agenda, the so-called consent agenda. Consent items are placed on our agenda because they are believed to be non-contentious, yet they may warrant council's recognition and or action. Grouping them expedites our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, and individual action may do so. There are 3 items on our consent agenda tonight, a big reduction in some of the recent agendas that we've had, including the minutes of our last regular council meeting. Councillors, anything to extract here or any corrections to the minutes that you would like noted? I'm not seeing any indication of that, so I have a resolution for our consideration that consent item 7.1 to 7.3 be received for information in the minutes of the May 27th, 2024 regular council meeting be adopted. Can I call for mover on this? Councillor Nordham, thank you. Councillor Johnston will be our seconders. Any discussion or debate on that? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you very much. At this time, it's proposed that we move to agenda item number 8. Our agenda indicates tonight that we will hold a special public meeting related to a matter under the Planning Act. For the purpose of executing this public meeting under the Planning Act, I use my discretion as head of council to announce a recess that will last the duration of the public meeting. We are recessed. Now, let's turn to this public meeting, certainly the first of this nature under my tenure as mayor. We are having a public meeting dealing with applications of the Planning Act in our community. Welcome to those who are attending the public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. This is a statutory public meeting required under the legislation to deal with a proposed attainable housing community improvement plan. Correspondence, reports, and comments received regarding this subject will be considered by council. Those in attendance remotely wishing to make comments concerning this plan will be given the opportunity to do so. Anyone wishing to appeal council's decision in this matter, when that decision is made, must make verbal submissions during this public meeting or have already made a written submission to council. Those wishing to receive notice of the decision regarding this application must notify the clerk via email or telephone, providing their mailing address and telephone number. At this time, we're going to learn a little bit about this proposed community improvement plan. We're going to get a summary that will be offered by Amelia Sloan, who is the planning lead, and Dipali Dang, urban planner and designer from Stantec Consulting, who the corporation has hired for the purpose of bringing forward this report and proposition. So I will turn the floor over to those two and leave at your discretion how you proceed. Let me get your microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to you and to the rest of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present this CIP for your consideration and be part of the public meeting of council, which is held pursuant to Section 28 of the Planning Act to consider this draft community improvement plan, which I believe you have in your notes as a draft document. Um, as the Mayor said, my name is Amelia Sloan. I'm a senior planner at Stantec Consulting, and I'm here with Polly Dang, who's also the main land use planner and urban designer from the team coordinating the completion of this document. I'll hand it over to her a little later, so we'll kind of tag team on this presentation. We have about 20 minutes, I believe, to present today, and then we'll be open to comments and feedback from council and the public at the end of the presentation. Thank you. So looking back on the project schedule, the original scope of work took most of the fall and winter months and occurred in 4 phases. Stantec first completed the background study that was based on our review of the applicable provincial policies, as well as county and local policy documents related to land use, development, and affordable housing. Our needs assessment report was drafted during this phase and provided to staff for comments. Phase 2 of this project also involved gathering feedback directly from the public. So that's the first phase where we went to the public. We asked for kind of key involvement in the attainable housing and how the programs would look. We also incorporated municipal feedback in stage 2, and both staff and council members were involved at that consultation stage and stage 2 of the project. In the third phase, we drafted the proposed policy directions and incentive programs for the first draft of the CIP, and that was refined based on staff input and will be further refined in this current phase 4 of the program. So we're looking for feedback tonight, and also agency consultation still is required to finalize this community improvement plan. Most notably, the feedback that we expect to receive from Municipal Affairs and Housing in the upcoming weeks. I will note that MMAH is a commenting agency for CIPs, which means that their review will be necessary to advance council adoption. We're typically provided comments from MMAH within about a 30-day turnaround. They have noted that a 60-day commenting period is what they will need for this particular draft review. So we're about halfway through that commenting period. So with those comments, we'll have a little bit more time to discuss some recent feedback that has come up through this draft. But it also means that council won't be able to adopt the CIP at tonight's meeting. It will likely be targeted for a July or August agenda in the future. For any members of the public that may not have been involved in the development of the CIP to date, the plan is intended to set out tools and strategies for improving the built economic and social environment in a designation or designated area of the municipality. So to achieve this, it delivers one or more of the following goals: facilitating change and transition in certain areas, stimulating economic growth and development, motivating rehabilitation and development of private buildings and properties, and raising awareness to local needs and priorities. There is an existing CIP in North Perth, which is a separate document from this proposed CIP. So the intention of this particular CIP specifically is to spur private sector development and attainable housing. A focus has also been placed on attainable housing within the rental market. Through consultation and review, the team started with the development of an overarching goal for the CIP, which is, as stated on the screen, the North Perth Attainable Housing Community Improvement Plan will minimize financial barriers to the creation of rental, affordable, and attainable housing within the municipality to encourage the development of a mix of housing along the housing continuum within North Perth. So we have scoped the CIP to address financial barriers specifically, which were a key stakeholder concern. Also, we have focused on rental housing for development that meets the definition of affordable and attainable. Current CIP defines affordable as housing in the case of rental housing means the least expensive of either a unit for which the rent does not exceed 30% of gross annual household income for low and moderate households, or a unit for which the rent is at or below the market rent of a unit in the municipality. So the CIP currently defines attainable as housing that costs less than 30% of a household's income before taxes. The objectives of the CIP have been determined to be one, to reduce the number of vacant or underutilized or underperforming buildings and properties through the promotion of renovation, repair, or rehabilitation of said buildings for attainable housing purposes. Two, to increase the municipality's inventory of attainable housing. Three, to encourage a mix of housing types. Four, to encourage a range of affordable units along the housing continuum, from deeply affordable units to close to market. Five, provide support for projects that are considered more deeply affordable along the housing continuum and or those that are more sustainable. And six, reinforce the provision of attainable housing as a community priority. For the next slide, I'm just going to pass the microphone to my colleague, Dipali, to speak more specifically about the programs that we've proposed as part of this draft. Thank you. The CIP offers 5 financial incentive programs to eligible applicants. The first one being the Planning and Building Permit Fee Grant, which is provided to cover 50% of the eligible fees for a proposed project or property up to a maximum of $5,000. This may include costs associated with zoning bylaw amendments, minor variances, site plan control, and other development fees. The second one is the Tax Increment Equivalency Grant, which is to stimulate investment by deferring part of the increase in property tax for an attainable housing project. This will be provided over 10 to 15 years, with 100% of the tax increment being provided in year one and gradually reducing by 10% each year. The costs may include, but are not limited to, those associated with redevelopment, restoration, expansion, and professional consulting services for the proposed development. The third one is the DC rebate program offered by the DC Act, which will be in the form of a DC waiver with a maximum value of 100% of the applicable development charges based on the number of attainable units that are being provided by the proposed development. The fourth one is the Additional Dwelling Unit Grant Program. This provides incentives to add legal secondary suites accessory to the primary unit. The maximum value of this grant shall be 50% of eligible costs, up to a maximum of $10,000 per property. This amount can go up to $15,000 if the proposed project meets the definition of a sustainable building. Costs include those associated with egress, engineering, accessibility, and interior design works, as well as professional consulting services for a proposed unit. Finally, the Commercial and Rental Housing Conversion and Expansion Grant may be provided for up to $20 per square foot of expanded or converted space, up to $10,000. This value may be a maximum of $20,000 or 50% of eligible costs per property if the proposed project satisfies the CIP requirements along with design and sustainable building design requirements. Thank you. The key eligibility criteria for the previously mentioned grants requires the proposed developments to comply with the following. Meet the definition of affordable or attainable provided in the CIP or by an upper level of the government. Be located in a primary or secondary community improvement area. Contribute to a minimum of 5 or more units for the TIEG and DC rebate program. Please note that this is based on recent feedback. The maximum combined value of grants must not exceed $20,000 over a 24-month period.
The total value of grants must also not exceed the total value of eligible costs in the project. Retroactive grants for works prior to the adoption of the CIP are not eligible. There must be no outstanding tax arrears or municipal obligations. The units must be maintained as affordable or attainable for a minimum period of 20 years or the minimum duration on the registered agreement, which may be extended by the municipality or at the council's discretion. And finally, the units are not permitted to be used as short-term accommodations. The application process for the grants is as follows. The applicant initially conducts a pre-consultation with the municipality for the proposed development. The type of development determines the eligibility of grants and appropriate review process. For instance, a new apartment building or a mixed-use development would be eligible for the Planning and Building Permit Fee Grant, the TIEG grant, and the DC rebate program, and that would require a minimum of 5 new dwelling units to be provided by the development. On the other hand, the addition of a dwelling unit to a detached home would be eligible for the Planning and Building Permit Fee, the ADU program, and the Rental Housing Conversion and Expansion Grant, and would require 1 new attainable unit to be provided by the development. Once the application has been reviewed, work on development must commence within six months of approval. And once the work has been completed, it will undergo a final inspection to ensure consistency with the approved application description. Once that has been completed, a lump sum of the amount approved by the CIP Implementation Committee or Council is paid upon successful completion. Throughout the CIP process, we have consulted with the public through 1 public open house and 1 virtual survey. Roughly 72% of the respondents felt that there was not an adequate supply of housing available at an appropriate price range in North Perth. The common themes identified were the desire for more small, entry-level and apartments that reflect the wages in the area and are geared towards new buyers and single-income individuals. We have engaged with stakeholders through 1 virtual workshop and through individual meetings with municipal staff. Some of the common themes identified were the disconnection between government definitions of affordable, attainable housing and what homeowners may need, common barriers to affordable, attainable housing, such as planning approval timelines, construction costs, lack of appropriately located land, and NIMBYism. And finally, comparative programs of interest, such as the ones included in the CIP. For the next slide, I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Amelia.
Thanks to Polly. There have been 4 items that have been discussed in relation to the draft CIP document that's in front of you tonight. Firstly, we have been tasked to investigate the inclusion of a threshold number of units for the general eligibility criteria of the financial programs. Our intent with the CIP is to encourage a higher number of affordable housing units by leveraging the development of such units. So Stantec's proposed response would be to include criteria requiring a minimum of 5 or more affordable/attainable rental dwelling units for both the TIG, that's the TIEG grant, and also the DC rebate program. So that's been added into the draft, or is proposed to be added into the final draft of the CIP. Those would come with the caveat that this threshold would be monitored annually by the CIP Implementation Committee. And we have specifically chosen these programs because of their value and ability to provide higher density development. A common question has been, when can the CIP be adopted and intake applications received? I will note that MMAH comments will be required in advance of council adoption of the CIP. A bit of a follow-up question on this has been, can retroactive grants be applied for? There is some precedence for this in other CIP documents. although administratively it might be a challenge to implement. So we are still considering backdating the start of some of the programs to a date like January 2024 and onward, so kind of at the start of the CIP program. Whether or not these should be considered as eligible still warrants some investigation and discussion on our part, particularly with MMH. Lastly on this list, there was a question on the grant approval timelines for committee members. We will note that with council adoption, the committee would also need to have delegated authority to implement the CIP. So there should be consideration for these pieces to occur in the same council meeting to be able to coordinate approvals from the date of council adoption. Also, since this agenda was published, there's been some concerns expressed with the definition of affordable housing that has been interpreted using stats and data. As such, we want to ensure that the CIP program is as clear and successful as possible in providing for projects that support the creation of affordable/attainable housing. So we will note this feedback along with all the other feedback we received tonight and provide you with a comment response matrix or a table based on any additional feedback that we receive at tonight's meeting. So just to conclude, thank you for considering the work completed to date on this project, and please let us know if there's any questions.
All right. Thank you to the team from Stantec for their presentation. The clerk has advised me, and council has seen evidence, certainly, that the notice for this public meeting was given in accordance with the Planning Act and the timelines that are provided for such notice. This then brings us to the opportunity in this public meeting for those who wish to make comments to do so. In doing so, anyone who wishes to make comments should provide their name and contact information on a sign-up sheet, which is on the table at the back of the council chambers. So the opportunity now for those who wish to make comments generally is available to you at this point, and we will have council questions and comments to follow. Anyone wishing to avail themselves of the opportunity? I'll do my best auctioneer. So that's going once, going twice. Anyone wishing to avail themselves of the opportunity to speak on this plan in draft? Okay, that's the second call. Third call and final call. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter in this public meeting? I'm not seeing any at this point, so we can record that no comments were received in the public meeting. Colleagues, this is your opportunity to ask questions and make suggestions, I think, for the adjustment of this plan to our aspirations. So I'll invite those who wish to make comments to do so. Councillor Rothwell.
Good evening, Mayor Kasenberg, members of council, staff, and public. Thanks very much for the presentation. I have a series of questions, but I'll just ask my first two with the permission of the mayor. What is our projected budget amount for this program? I mean, clearly we've outlined here in the report various eligible amounts depending on the project, but I'm just wondering what I didn't see specifically in the report a budget figure for both 2024, if we are backdating it to 2024, as well as ongoing for 2025. Thank you.
I'll call on the consultants or Ms. McLean, whoever would like to take a stab at this. If you need Mr. Romani, you can do that too. I see he's in the room. Oh, let me get the podium microphone. Hold on. There we go.
To you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. We have discussed that a bit, and it is something that will come as our implementation plan develops. There was some funds included in the 2024 budget to support implementation this year, but we do need to look further into what next year would look like.
Fair enough. Thanks very much for that. And depending on that, what I'm concerned about is that when we look at our schedules here, it's basically the our settlement areas, in particular listable Atwood, Moncton, and Kurtzville, I believe, that we're looking at both the primary and secondary areas. But in our rural areas, we specifically allow, in both the county official plan as well as in our zoning bylaws, additional dwelling units. And I'm wondering if, or A, what the rationale was for excluding our rural areas from the CIP, and then alternatively, what's our potential for having a very specific policy to support additional dwelling units in our rural areas. Thank you.
Okay, let me turn to the consultants. I think on this one, they may be more familiar with the thinking.
Any additional insight? I think the exclusion of the rural areas was based on the feedback we received to try to concentrate affordable housing closer to where jobs are located. So if there's a desire to kind of open it up to the entirety of the municipal or the community improvement area, to the entirety of the municipality, that's definitely something that we could consider at this point. Definitely there is CIPs that do that and allow for incentive programs within the rural area. And now that legislation has changed significantly over the course of the last few years to allow for more flexibility for on-farm second units, that might be something that the municipality could consider doing. So it's not a no. I think we just scoped it out because we wanted to make sure the development was concentrated where there is a concentration of jobs. But it's still open for discussion.
Thank you.
Paul, do you have anything?
Anything supplementary on that one before I check our colleagues?
I'll hold for now to give others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments, colleagues, on this plan? Councillor Duncan, let me get your microphone. There you go.
Thank you. I'm not sure, through you, Mayor, but I'm not sure who to address it to. The CIP administrator, is the CIP administrator going to be a current staff member, or do we have to hire a staff member for this position, or?
I think I'll call on.
I could start and then maybe I'll pass it to staff. I think the way we've written the CIP is that it could be either or. So if current staff don't feel like they have the capacity to, then that would be a consideration in the future. But it really depends on the amount of intake and uptake of the program. And then I think the staff would have to make the determination whether or not they can facilitate the role within the existing roles and responsibilities that they currently have. So the way we've tried to write the implementation plan is to minimize the number of hours that it takes existing staff to review applications. So that is kind of a goal of the CIP, to make sure that it's municipally implementable. It doesn't cause undue burden onto existing staff members.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, who's next? Councillor Rounswell, you're next.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. Further question I have is that in the report it does talk about the definition of affordability and affordable and attainable. And as this council as well as the consultants know, that we're awaiting the Minister of Municipal Affairs to actually come up with that definition. Clearly, in the comments here, it was stated that Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing is a commenting agency, and we have to wait for their comments. But what I'm concerned about is that we've waited this long already for a definition of affordable and attainable from the province, and I'm hopeful, like everyone else is here, I'm sure, that we'll get that definition soon. But frankly, if we have to wait until we have a new definition, is that a reality? Is that we will have to wait till we have a new definition from the ministry?
So our intent is to write the definition in a way that it could be reinterpreted by council once the definition gets updated at the province. So in the same way, we make reference to different policy definitions within an official plan. If that definition changes at the provincial level, we'll just include some wording that with the definition change at the provincial level, that will automatically change the definition within the CIP. So in that case, additional consultation won't be needed to update the CIP, and it won't result in a CIP amendment.
I think that's wise, and I appreciate that comment. The last question I have is more from a technical standpoint. In the schedule proposed for the areas for both the primary and the secondary applications of the CIP, I take it we've used the proposed designated areas under the county official plan, the new proposed county official plan. I'll just say here, I'm concerned about that, given the fact that that's not an adopted document as yet. And there has been, like at the one public meeting I was here or attended at the Steve Kerr Memorial Complex by the county, there was concerns about some of the areas that are designated on the south side of Line 84 being included in the listable settlement area. So what I'm concerned about is that the document is proposed to on the basis of that new mapping, and it's not official as yet. So I'm concerned about that. I just want to have a response. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Rothwell. CAO Snell, did you want to weigh in on the reference that Councillor Rothwell made to official plan progress in terms of lands being designated, in particular the south side of Line 84, which certainly drew some public attention?
I certainly understand the county has taken those comments into consideration, but I have not yet seen the new draft of the proposed settlement area. So I'm sure we can work with Stantec and decide how we want to make sure that the CIP for the development communities is worded in such a way that it covers the described settlement areas as per the Perth County official plan.
Okay, Councillor Rothwell.
Just for clarification on that, thanks very much for the response through the mayor. I'm wondering if we could have something similar that the official plan in place at the time is what I'm understanding that our CAO has said here. Is that the way would be, we wouldn't have to come back and amend the schedule? Is that, yeah. Good, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I thought I saw a hand in my peripheral vision. Anyone over on this side? We're okay? I'll raise the issue. I want to go there a little further, the issue of affordability and the definition. We all know that there's a bit of a nightmare that's been created in the field of trying to define. But when certainly you look at certain potential modeling, that number could be excessively high based on certain models that I've seen. So I'm expressing concern that we need to find a reliable source for the definition of affordability. We've heard rumor that the province will release something, as Councillor Rothwell has indicated. I'm not inclined to hold my breath on this one at this point in time. But I do think that we need to find a definition of affordability that tries to bake in notions around equity as well. We can wind up with sort of the ridiculous circumstance where we come up with an affordable number that really is oriented at the median household income in Perth County. And that's one reasonable hypothetical basis for selecting affordability. But when you do that and work backwards from that median income, you wind up with an average rent, the rent that fits of $2,100 a month, which really is not affordable for anyone who's working in industrial environments or even in farming environments in our community. So that definition is going to fail, in my opinion. We also have to account for the fact, from an equitable perspective, in my opinion, for the differences in household size. And I'm not sure how we do that. That's sort of one of these big boondoggles that we have to kind of figure out. But we do have individuals who are single, who work and live in this community, in some cases in the industrial environment, and numbers that would penalize their income because it looks at the median household income would be problematic for them. They would not find it affordable under any circumstance. So we have to sort of think about how we make it possible for those who are single in our community and who are looking for a home to have an affordable home. And I think it's incumbent then that we evaluate an approach. Ms. McLean was kind enough today, as I shared some of these concerns with her earlier, to share with me that there is a DC, a development charge basis for determining affordability that the province has released, and that it periodically updates, as I understand from the hints in Ms. McLean's email to me on this. And those numbers are a lot more understandable. They seem more relevant to the circumstances. So I'm not sure how reliable or steady a source that is, but certainly it seems like the province does publish periodic updates, and it might not be the worst strategy in the world to tie our affordable benchmarks to the provincial DC charge benchmark as one possible approach. Other approaches that we may want to think about, of course, include looking at the individual household income, but that's a nightmare for developers, right? You can't look at my income and Councillor Duncan's income and Councillor Blazek's income and figure out what's affordable, because each of us would have a different basis for that decision. So we do need to find some kind of sort of averaging or market-based approach. But clearly, it's not 80% of the average market value, which was something that had been floated earlier, I think. Clearly, there are challenges with tying it to the median household income in Perth County. And so there are some challenges here that we have to sort out. And the big question for me, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but the big question for me is, do we wait for the province to solve the problem of what affordable means in any market? Or do we strike out on our own and send in our own proposition of what the definition of affordable or attainable is in the context of our plan and let the province chew on it? And I'm kind of more inclined towards the latter, given the timing and given the challenges that could emerge. So just some thoughts. Mm-hmm. You're welcome to offer comment. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very important comment and a very important discussion. From our point of view, we'd like to make sure that the document that you have in front of you is a flexible document that can be kind of reinterpreted throughout changing definitions. So we want to make sure that whatever definition ends up being tied to the plan, if that's changed by the province, that can kind of fluctuate and move with the municipality, as this figure might fluctuate year over year as the market changes. We also want to make sure that there's kind of no undue or extra burden on municipal staff to recalculate it every time an intake round comes up. So potentially an annual update could be worked into the monitoring plan to ensure that the definition is reflective of the current council priorities. Something we can definitely consider. I think the creation of a very different definition may create some undue kind of work at the municipal level each time that an application comes in. So I think tying it to an existing either provincial document or legislation or regulation is something that I would encourage. Not to say that we're not open to different approaches, but if we do find a different approach that has worked within Ontario, then that's something we'll definitely investigate. So I don't think that the work here is done for defining affordable and attainable and how it relates to this CIP document itself. There may be some additional guidance that we can provide as part of an accompanying document to kind of help the municipality navigate some of these challenges. and then potentially keeping it as an open standard definition in the CIP document itself may be an approach.
Okay, thank you. Comments further? Let's.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. And I want to thank the mayor, but also our staff and certainly our consultants for their work on this important issue. We've talked around this table about how affordability is a crucial issue in our community and beyond. It's not just a local, it's provincial, it's nationwide, it's worldwide. But anyways, I really want to thank the staff and our consultant for giving us some different tools here that we can perhaps employ to address the issue that's before us, sort of one issue at a time. And I really want to thank staff for that. And I'm hopeful, as was pointed out in the report, that there will be discussion at the county level that we could have the county come forward with implementation of a similar program, perhaps funding to help on a county-wide level to address the issue of affordability, to utilize some of these tools that have been presented before us. I know it's new. I know that not everyone has the same issues across the county, but frankly, it is a serious issue within our community, and we do make up a significant portion of the population of the county, and so I suspect and I know that our county councillors representative here have made that point, but I'll encourage them to make it further and our staff to have the support of the county going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rothwell. Let me just turn to CAOs now. Councillor Rothwell raises an interesting issue, and I'm wondering if we can get your professional opinion on the ways that the county might be involved in future work around CIP support, engagement, or even initiation at the county level. What can you tell us about that?
If you look at some of our neighboring counties, for example, the county of Huron and the county of Bruce have county level CIPs that actually complement any lower tier CIPs. So certainly any support that the county could give on any initiatives that we're implementing and or new initiatives that would help for affordable attainable housing across the county could either stack with our CIP or just other solutions that go beyond our community improvement plan.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Andreessen, I think I saw your hand wave.
Yes, through you, Mayor Kaysenberg, and to council and the public and our staff this evening, welcome. I think that this community improvement plan for attainable housing is really one of our next best steps. And I really think that this is a great way, especially through the grant program, that we could really address affordability. And once we get some more tweaking, through the definitions of affordable housing, I think that this could be an excellent tool, and especially dedicated for purpose-built affordable housing. I think that this is a much more suitable tool to support affordable housing than perhaps some other tools like just development charges themselves. I think this grant program that's proposed is probably a good tool itself to support attainable housing as we move forward. So I want to thank the team and Stantec and our staff for the work that they put into this so far, because I think we're paving the road. I think we're on the way to, albeit some more work needs to be done, but I think we're well on our way for this community improvement plan to make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to make comments or ask questions on council at this hour? All right, I'm not seeing any hands wave, so let me give what we think is the statutory notice for this meeting. It's a bit of a guess, but we're going to use the usual statutory notice, which is that notice of the decision of council will be given in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. Council's decision is subject to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal in accordance with provisions of the Planning Act, and that, of course, assumes that council will take an action at some point in the near future. And with that, colleagues, we can adjourn this public meeting. All right, I'm going to declare now that the recess period during which a public meeting was held is over, and that we have reconvened into our regular public meeting. I do have a resolution for our consideration immediately as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth acknowledges that a public meeting was held pursuant to Section 28 of the Planning Act for the purpose of considering a proposed community improvement plan. Can I call for a mover on this? Thank you, Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Blazek. Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. All right, still in Section 8, as item 8.2, we are joined by James Craig of CBRE Real Estate Limited, who wishes to present information on behalf of Nizar Mawani and Kanalamika Inc. Mr. Mawani and Kanalamika Inc. are currently owners of and proponents for an approved housing development in our community that has been called Listowel Gardens. Mr. Craig intends to present on the intersection of the provisions of the proposed CIP and impacts on the Listowel Gardens development. Mr. Craig, you are welcome to attend the microphone.
Good evening. I'm actually going to pass the microphone over to opportunity to protect the project.
You need to press the green. Yeah, get it green.
Perfect.
There we go.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mayor. I'm actually going to pass the mic over to Robert Turner, the architect of the project, to give a brief overview of the project first.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, councillors, Mr. Mayor, and municipal staff for allowing us the opportunity to discuss the proposed development at the intersection of Twomley and Mitchell. My name is Robert Turner, Fright Turner Architects in Elora. We've been working on this project for roughly 2 years now, and we are at a stage where we're finalising permits, we're finalising financial arrangements, and the design is now also finalised. Slide, please. Who's got the button? Thanks. Thank you. So this is the site, which is bordered on one side by Mitchell, on the left side by Twomley, and the piece in the bottom right corner is the Pioneer gas station. We're talking about the first stage of a proposed 3-stage development, which will eventually include 2 residential buildings. That's phase 1 there. The second phase will be that one there, which is a total of 178 units. A 14,000 square foot commercial building, and a clubhouse amenity building for the residents' use. In between them, there's some fairly detailed designed landscaping for outdoor activity spaces for the residents. Our aims in the project are fairly straightforward. We want to provide high-quality, attainable rental apartments. We think it's very important to try and create a sense of community, and for everyone's future, we must do all we can to be sustainable. The unit types, we have a mixture of affordable/attainable and market rental apartments. We have bachelor units, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, ranging from 422 to 952 square feet rentable. All the units will have a patio or a balcony, and 15% of the units will be accessible ready, which for clarification, is units which can readily be adapted for residents with mobility challenges as defined by the building code. The amenity space and landscaping between the buildings, like I said, there's a lot of design effort has gone into this, and there will be a lot of use for the residents in this space. We have over 10,000 square feet of grass and planting, patio and barbecue areas, 4,500 square feet, an area for children's play equipment at 1,800 square feet, pickleball court, and a dog run. So we're nearly 20,000 square feet of designed exterior amenity space. In addition to that, there is the clubhouse amenity building. So this will be a 3,800 square foot building in the centre of the development, which will have fairly flexible spaces that can be reconfigured, but the base program is a common room with a kitchen, a gymnasium, yoga room, meeting space, and the management office for the development as a whole. The sustainability is a large part of the design effort that's gone into this project. And a great deal of effort has gone into making it as energy efficient as possible. We're aiming for a reduction in total energy consumption of 40% when compared with the current National Energy Code, and also for a reduction of 50% in greenhouse gas emissions. And the way that we're achieving that is a tight building envelope. Air and vapor barriers will seal the building. Exterior doors and windows will be fully weather stripped. The glazing will be double glazed windows to minimize air leakage and heat loss, and the glass will be designed to limit solar heat gain in the summer. Within the building, high performance LED lighting with occupancy sensors. Water heating will actually be on in-suite electric hot water heating, so there is actually no natural gas consumption in the building at all. And there won't be any circulation pumps, which are often found in rental apartments, which is a big cause of wasted energy. The building itself is actually very pale in colour, and the roof will be pale in colour to minimise daytime heat absorption and radiation of that heat at night. The biggest piece, though, the biggest piece of our sustainability is the use of renewable energy, and it will represent a very significant investment on the part of the developer. The building will be heated and cooled by geothermal loops. So these are 750-foot deep wells, which provide a source of heat for the heat pumps which are in each suite, but they'll also form a sink for excess heat during the cooling season. Each suite will have an energy recovery ventilator which minimises the wasted energy, and kitchen extract hoods will actually recirculate rather than dumping straight to the outside. So that's a very quick rundown of the building itself. So if James can come back up.
Great. Thanks again, Mayor and Council and City staff as well for the opportunity to speak tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the roadblocks that we've encountered with CMHC in respects to getting the financing for this project. One of the things that I think probably hurts the most was the reduction in the rental rates that they were using. As we know, it's not cheap to build new construction. That's probably one of the biggest things and challenges that developers face is the cost to construct new. So it's something that was very detrimental to our pro forma. As a result of their reducing the rental rates, it also reduced the loan amount, which again brings up the questionability of viability. So the CIP benefits become even more crucial to the success of the development, specifically with a couple of points that I'll talk about as well. I think the goal here fundamentally is we're trying to get this building into the ground as quickly as possible, recognizing that the need for housing is great. The hope to try and get the building completed before, or at least completed or tapped off by the end of the year. With respects to the development charges, I think there were some conversations earlier about affordable and attainable rent. With respects to CMHC, they, with the MLI Select program, They use a renter household income in rural of Ontario of $42,000 per year, which works out to roughly $1,037 per month. That's what they consider to be affordable. Using the definition, I think, Mayor, you mentioned that earlier as well, $82,000 or roughly just under $2,100 per month is what they consider to be attainable. I think what this development is proposing to do is to speak to the whole market, not just the specifics of just being affordable and attainable, but as well as market. And I think as a result, we're able to hit 74% of a building being either attainable or affordable, which is a pretty high number for most new builds being done in most markets these days. I think, as noted, one of the things that we did notice that was quite refreshing to see was some of the benefits of having a viable green project come forward and allowing for some further incentives. So I think the TEAG program being critical to that 15-year program as a result of having those benefits, I think are a benefit to the community as well as development being able to continue to move forward. With respects to the building and permit fee grant, I think there was some talk about whether or not some retroactive abilities of the program be implemented. And I think this is a case, an example where we're certainly ahead of this being implemented by North Perth. However, we think we want to get this project into the ground and be a poster child of what can be done in the community. And so the ask is here is that we can look to have some of these benefits implemented for this project to move forward as soon as possible ultimately. So I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Colleagues, do you have questions for our delegation this evening? Councillor Norda.
Thanks, through you, Mayor Kiesenberg. Just curious, is there a timeline on how long these units will remain attainable or affordable? Like 15 years, 20 years, 10 years?
Yes, the CMHC program, the way it was applied for, it's a minimum of minimum of 10 years for the affordable component. There isn't currently a requirement for the attainable piece. That's something I think that's been fairly new over the last little while.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rothwell's next.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. Thanks very much for your presentation. I think we've certainly heard a lot about your project, and this council has been very supportive, I believe. But it's very exciting to see projects of this size incorporating the number of units, 178, I believe you said total, between phases 1 and 2, and the fact that there's a range of affordable, attainable, and market rent. I certainly understand the need within our community, and I just want to underscore again through our council that we are very supportive, and frankly, if there's anything else that we can do, I think council may be prepared to do that in terms of talking with CMHC. I will say it's disconcerting in terms of seeing sort of the yardstick move a little bit, or a lot, from CMHC's perspective, and I am hopeful, as well as you, I'm sure, that this project will get the green light from CMHC, because unfortunately many projects have not. And there's great hope that when a project is announced by CMHC in terms of funding, that it will actually address the needs, the real needs in our community. And I'm hopeful that the municipality can work with you to, in fact, get those shovels in the ground and get this going. So I wish you all the best.
Great. Thank you for your support.
Others with questions for the delegation or comments? Okay, it looks like Mr. Mawani would like to join you at the podium. Mr. Mawani, welcome.
Worship the Mayor, the Council, members of the audience, thank you very much for allowing us. We are at the midst of finalizing our agreements with CMHC, and part of their approval process, they're waiting to see if we can be granted the CIP into a pro forma. Failing that, surely CMHC is not going to fund this program. So this CIP will either make this project or break this project. And we are in the mix. We've already received an approval based on the fact that the CIP, that's why we asked to speak to council and to yourself, Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Mawani. I think, the news may not be what will impress you. I think what we heard is that the CIP still has some runway before it is finalized for council's consideration. And so I know that you've been working in a cohort with a deadline that we're probably not going to hit because of the procedures, the very built-in procedures of considering a CIP. It looks like the consultant would like to say a few words, so I'll turn on that microphone. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. To you through Mr. Mayor. I think we are trying to finalize the CIP as quickly as we can. So we're kind of identifying some items that we think MMAH will comment on, and we'll be prepared to have comments back to them based on what we anticipate their comments are going to be. So we're hoping that that process doesn't take the full 30 days in the remainder of the 60-day window that we have open. Obviously, that's not a guarantee, but definitely having a meeting like this and being kind of involved in all the background that needs to happen from, the municipal standpoint in order to implement the CIP and kind of get it in a shape where you can hit the ground running as soon as council adopts it is our goal at this point. So it is unfortunate that there might be some retroactive wording that needs to be put into the CIP to encourage this particular development, but we are trying the best we can to make sure that we're following the statutory requirements, but making sure we have the information necessary to continue moving this process forward quickly.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions or comments?
Just one more comment.
Sure. Let me get...
We implemented the 15% affordability from the beginning. We also took in a lot of information from the public and from the council that brought us to the sustainable product and attainable. So we brought in a lot more, and we have achieved all the targets that were set by CMHC as well. So the good news is that they are working with us. But I think that if I can work with Chris to at least get some sort of a communication document that is not guaranteed, but in the next 30 days, there'll be some resolution to this. So we can then pass that to the CMHC to hold the file. If they shut the file, then perhaps we have to go back again to them. And when we go into queue, CMHC takes forever to do that. What we'd like to see is get into the ground by July or August. I'm also here with my partners, Mr. Larry Hudson, and the family have supported this project, and we're appreciative of their support on this project as well.
Okay, thank you. I know that we should hear from CAO Snell on this. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I believe that there's certainly a fairly strong will on the part of this council, as has been shown in past votes, to see this project emerge in our community. So, if there's a path that we can use to assist this, knowing that the CIP has a statutory lane and hurdles that you have to jump over, I think we'd like to hear about that. So, CAO Snell, do you see any action that the municipal corporation can take at this point to the end of trying, or for our consideration at least, to support this proponent?
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly don't think there's any harm in us providing a letter to the developer, to notifying CMHC that we are in the midst of approving CIP plan, and that many of the components of this development will meet the requirements of the plan, and that we hope to finalize the plan in the next 30 days or so, and hopefully that keeps the file open at the very least, so Nazir doesn't have to go to the back of the line again. And certainly maybe we could get some help from Stantec to with the wording on that possibly.
Okay, I think there is an urgency as I understand it. So did Stantec wish to weigh in on this one? I'll give you that license if you'd like.
I I just wanted to comment that, yes, we'd be available to try to help coordinate the creation of a letter back to the developer to point out all the ways that this development would meet the existing draft CIP and hope that CMHC uses that as the ability to put it into a holding pattern potentially for the next month or two.
Okay. Colleagues, does anyone have objection to that approach at this point in time? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hands in terms of objection. So in terms of will of council then, is it the will of council? Shall we have a resolution that directs staff and to work as needed with Stantec as our developers of a draft of a CIP to provide the developer with a letter under urgent conditions that indicate where council is with regards to developing a CIP and how this project might be supported through a CIP. I'm sorry, Clerk Carter, I know I sometimes mystify you with where I'm going, but hopefully you got something to that effect. Anyone have any improvements or suggestions based on my meandering resolution? Councillor Duncan?
Should we add that council supports the CIP in principle? And we just need to go through the statutory timelines and until we can approve it?
I mean, I think that we, subject to reasonable revisions that have been heard through the public meeting, we could, CEO Snell, does that make some sense to support in principle? Okay, the two of them are looking at each other and they're nodding and smiling. They're nodding and smiling, so this is usually a good sign. All right.
Way, I might as well move.
You don't want to interfere with the smiles there, Mr. Malani. You don't. All right. Let's add a clause then to the resolution that indicates that council supports in principle the draft of the CIP pending final adjustments from public and council comments. Something like that. Is that sounding okay, Clerk Carter? You're not smiling yet, but she's working on it. We'll wait her out. We have patience. Although someone might want to adjust the air conditioning in this room. It's feeling a bit on the stuffy side, at least at this table. All right, so I think Councillor Rothwell wishes the honor of moving this. Deputy Mayor Callum will be our seconder. And let's have any further discussion or debate to see if there is any concern. Okay, Clerk Carter, do you actually have a final draft? Would you like to read that into the record for us?
Okay, so I have that staff be directed to work with Stantec to draft a letter to the developer under urgent conditions, indicating council's current position in the development of a community improvement plan and how the proposed development meets the proposed CIP, and that council supports in principle the draft CIP pending revisions to include comments, questions provided during the public meeting, and legislated timelines.
And by council. I don't know if we need that in there, in the last clause there. In the public meeting, by council. Probably comments around it.
Can I also, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, note that council, agency be included as well?
Right.
Just make sure we cover municipal affairs and housing comments.
Yeah, we need to comply as they bring forward their suggestions and comments. Okay. Does everyone understand what's on the floor? All right, we're good. Any further discussion or debate? Not seeing any. We're ready for a vote. Are you? We're ready for a vote. Here we go. And that is unanimously carried. Thank you. We appreciate that staff and Stantec have an urgent deadline. And I think Council is going to ask you to prioritize your day tomorrow to achieve that. Thanks. All right. Let's move forward then. That takes us past this section of the agenda to item 9, which are reports from departments and key staff. We do have one item tonight from the Corporate Services Department. In item 9.1.1, Treasurer Romani brings forward a new development charge study, which is intended to precede Council's consideration of a new development charge bylaw in the near future. You can see that Mr. Romani has queued up at the podium to begin this report. He is accompanied by his friend, Mr. Mirabelli, am I close? From Hampson, and Mr. Romani, you can call on him as you need him, but the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, and good evening, members of Council. So before you tonight, we have the draft 2024 municipal wide development charges for your feedback. As mentioned before, we have Andrew Mirabella from Hampton Consulting for a more comprehensive presentation following my remarks. But before that, I'd like to highlight some keynotes as referenced in the report. So development charges are the primary way for Ontario municipalities to raise funds for necessary services and infrastructure improvements resulting from development. These charges are intended to help pay for the cost of capital infrastructure required to provide municipal services to new developments such as roads, water, sewer, parks and recreation, and fire services. A number of these projects are already reflected in our current 10-year capital plan. Without these development charges, funding would need to come from alternative funding sources to sustain these growth-related costs. The most recent municipal-wide development charge was approved back in 2019 and is set to expire in September of this year, which is why this project is currently underway. So staff have been working with Hampton over the last 2 quarters in preparing the update with various input measures such as the updated population forecast and related capital pressures. Included in the report and presentation are the draft rates on the outcome of these considerations, but I believe Mr. Mirabella will walk you through in more detail. A key observation, both myself and the consultants, is that the municipalities since the last bylaw and the introduction of the last bylaw did not index the development charges over the life of the bylaw. Indexing is a common practice for municipalities to ensure that the charges remain reflective of the current economic conditions and inflationary cost pressures over the life bylaw, considering that the bylaw is prepared in current day dollars. This promotes financial stability and helps avoid large increases at the time of the next study, which can burden those that are impacted by these charges. For comparative purposes, Table 3 and 4 of the report include a 2019 calculated charge, which represents what the fee would have been had it been indexed. When comparing the updated draft development charges fund, you'll see that the fee would have remained relatively flat had we indexed the rate for the standard residential unit. Given the significant importance of keeping pace with inflation, a recommendation to ensure that the municipality indexes its development charges will be proposed for Council's consideration at a future meeting. Also included in the report under Table 5 is a development charges comparison to area and similar sized municipalities. When referencing the chart, there are a few things to consider. The age of the municipality's bylaw, which will vary, as such may not be reflective of the municipality's current growth-related pressures. The municipality service models may vary, warranting different capital growth-related pressures. And some municipalities' development charges could be influenced by the provincially legislated mandatory 5-year phase-in, depending when the bylaw came into force, I think in the last 2 or 3 years, I believe. Where we had more up-to-date information, we tried to include that information in the comparators. So we've noted an asterisk beside their name, most notably West Perth and Mapleton, who are currently in the public consultation phase. So the intent at this point is to gather your feedback and release the background study for public comment on or before June 12th, with the statutory meeting occurring hopefully in July, with the final approval in the month of August in advance of the DC bylaw expiry. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it to Mr. Mirabella for his presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor and Council. My name again is Andrew Mirabella. Thanks for having me back here as a topic on development charges. So I'll go through my presentation, although Ashton kind of stole the punchline of my whole deck here with the draft rates, but we'll go through all the details and all the comments of kind of how we got to where we got to here. So just in terms of our agenda, we'll go through the development charge study summary in terms of our development forecast. I'll talk a little bit about the growth-related capital programs, and then we'll go through the draft rates as well as the rate comparison itself, and we'll talk on the timeline and next steps. Through this process, I will just brief you on some of the Bill 185 adjustments in terms of the legislative summary of what's happening as it's making its way through the House in terms of its reading status right now. So I know likely all are familiar what development charges are. They're fees imposed on development to fund the growth-related capital costs of infrastructure that's related to new development. It's about imposing or paying for new infrastructure to maintain service levels. The principle behind the DCs is that growth pays for growth. We can't use development charges to fund any asset repair or replacement type activities or anything that's not related to new development. We're bound by the Development Charges Act when we do our background studies. DCs in the municipality are imposed by Bylaw 78, 2019. The maximum life of the bylaw in 2019 when it was passed was 5 years. Under the changes to Bill 23, that would extend out to 10 years, so your new bylaw would run for a 10-year period. You have the authority to update earlier, but this is a update on that 5-year bylaw, which would expire September 1st of 2024. When you're passing a bylaw, you have to undertake a background study, which is the background information that we're doing, which will be released in a couple weeks. And that background study will start the official public consultation process, in which we'll have a statutory public meeting. Both those two elements are required to pass a new bylaw. If we go to the next slide, DCs are really just one tool given to municipalities to fund growth-related infrastructure. So there's the first kind of bucket of development charges, community benefits charges, and parkland fees. It's what we call kind of growth funding tools. And that funds the first round capital infrastructure that's directly related to new development. There's also direct developer contributions, which are outside the scope of the DCs, but anything that's related to a plan of subdivision that's directly related to a development, the direct developer would pay for that infrastructure. So local water mains, roadways, anything that's internal to that development would come from the direct developer contributions, which is outside of the DC calculation. And then property taxes and utility rates is probably the largest share here. That funds any of the statutory and non-statutory reductions on development charges. And it also funds the long-term repair and replacement and operating costs of that infrastructure. So despite DCs being used to fund the first round capital infrastructure, it now becomes the municipality's responsibility to operate it, maintain it, repair and replace it, which falls on the taxes and utility rates, which is a non-DC eligible funded service. So just in terms of our study process, we start off with our development forecast. We look at the amount, type, and location of development. That development forecast feeds into the development-related capital program, which is all the infrastructure required in order to support that growth that's been identified. There's a series of legislative deductions or requirements that are needed in order to comply with the regulations and the DC Act itself. So any grants, subsidies, contributions, any existing monies you might have on hand from DCs which have been collected for those projects, any shares of projects that aren't entirely driven by new development, those are all considered for and adjusted for in the calculation of the rate. The share of the cost that's eligible for recovery is the DC eligible component, which is delineated between your residential and your non-residential sector. Residentially, the charges are on a per unit basis. Non-residential is on a per square foot or per square meter of gross floor area. So just to kind of touch upon the DC legislation itself, it's been a bit of a moving target over the last several years, starting from Bill 108 with the More Homes, More Choices Act, Bill 197 from the COVID Economic Recovery Act, and then more recently Bill 23, the More Homes Build Faster Act, and then the latest one being Bill 185, the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act, which was introduced in April. When we published this slide deck, it was in second reading, and I think it's now actually moved to third reading, and I think they were debating it today. So Bill 185 is the latest of the legislative changes, and it actually undoes and reverses some of what's included in Bill 23. Primarily for Council's information, it is being proposed that the mandatory phase-in, which I spoke to you about during the Council information session on the Northeast Master Plan Development Charge Study, the 5-year phase-in is going to be proposed to be removed, and you're not obligated to do that anymore. And the reintroduction of development-related studies is also back on the table as part of the Bill 185. So those are two key pieces of DC revenue streams and funding tools, which is going to be hopefully back in the DC Act regime. It's not final yet, but that is what's on the proposal table as part of Bill 185. And all this, again, was kind of part of the province's mandate here to build more homes. And that's where kind of all these legislative changes have come about, some of which through Bill 185, taking the municipality's kind of viewpoint and kind of reintroducing some of those revenue tools, as it's recognized that those lost revenues don't actually help build more homes. So it's good that there's some listening happening at the province on that, on municipal advocation. So just on the development forecast, kind of key input number one here, we have to establish the DCs to which the areas apply between your area specific and municipal wide. We take a look at the Statistics Canada information, census data, and then largely based on the Perth County official plan update, we have planning periods from 10 years and 23 years for the purposes of our general services and roads, and water and wastewater on a longer term planning horizon. We look at the development in terms of residential, both population and dwelling units, and then we also look at the non-residential, which is going to be employment, and then we translate that into employment space for the purposes of calculating the DC. So on the development forecast summary, it's a little bit small here, but on our 10-year period, there's about 2,400 new households that is going to be planned to be constructed in the planning period, 2460, which would result in about 6,500 people arising from that development in those housing units. On the non-residential side, it's about 2,270 employees, which would equate to about 158,000 square meters of new non-residential building space. Over the long term, to accommodate the area-specific capital infrastructure needs, particularly for water and wastewater, we have a longer-term planning horizon, which would see development of about 5,100 dwelling units, with population arising from those dwelling units about 12,840 people. On the employment side, it's about 4,500 employees and 335,000 new non-residential building space. So fairly significant increase in your growth that we're seeing in this planning period, particularly as it is also relevant to the last DC study that we've done. We're seeing an uptake in the growth. Some of that's obviously seen in your recent trends, but it's also reflective of what's being shown and planned for in your official plan and through the county's targets. So keeping in mind that that growth forecast, then we look at the growth-related capital program, which is the infrastructure needed to support that development. We had a series of conversations with municipal staff, looked at your 2024 capital budget. There's certainly a research master plan, for example, your transportation master plan, the last DC background study, and we've compiled what we see as the new development-related capital program for this planning period in the municipality. Again, through the lens of the DC regime here. So we've looked at only your growth-related capital, and then we had to make those relevant DC eligible cost adjustments to each of the different projects to recognize those components of the Act, any grants or subsidies, benefit to existing shares, available DC reserves, and any shares of project that might benefit development over a longer period have been taken into consideration. So just to kind of summarize the capital program for your general services and your roads, we have a total gross cost of about $95 million for those programs. Your roads and related services, as well as your parks and recreation, represent the two largest components of that total gross project cost. But I want to emphasize is, although we see a $95.2 million gross related program over the next 10 years, the different columns represent the adjustments to that capital cost of what actually gets included for in the development charge calculation. So we have an adjustment of about $900,000 in grant subsidies and recoveries. About $32.6 million of the program is not considered to be development charge eligible, and that would be the benefit to existing shares. So that would have to be funded from non-DC sources. We have about $5.5 million in the DC's reserve funds for each of these specific categories, and which have been adjusted for in the cost, which brings us to about $53.5 million in that 2024 to 2033 period. That $55.5 million is what gets considered for as DC eligible and included for in the calculation of the rates. The residual of 2.7 million is what would be considered for in future DC studies, still development charge eligible, but outside of the planning period for recovery. On the engineered services side, which is a particular focus on roads, water, and stormwater management services, it's about a $57 million program. Wastewater services representing the lion's share of that at around $40 million. We have grants, subsidies, and other recoveries included in for about $10 million for your wastewater services. It relates to some contributions for any future plant expansions. But similar columns here, the net DC eligible cost is your middle column, and of that $57.3 million to start with, we end up with about $31.5 million that will be recovered from development charges over that planning period. So taking into two considerations of our development forecast and our capital costs that we just saw, we then we'll have our draft calculated rates, which is set on a per dwelling unit basis for residential development, and non-residential, it's on a per square meter of gross floor area basis and a uniform basis to all non-residential development. Singles and semi-detached dwelling units on the residential side, rows, apartments are differentiated by bedroom types, and special care dwellings as your last category. So just on this particular slide is our draft calculated rates for a serviced area. The single detached dwelling unit rate is calculated at $32,000, $32,472. The rows and apartments at $21,263, all the way down to your special care dwelling unit around $10,500. The pie graph on the right represents the share of the total charges itself and which category of service the per unit rates are going to. So of your $32,500 for your residential single detached dwelling unit, 34% of that would go to parks and recreation services. Wastewater would attract about 18% of that charge. Water services around 7% of that charge. And those are your largest components of the DC rate itself. Typically speaking, and roads and related would be 22%. Municipality that has both water and wastewater servicing, your parks and recreation, your roads, water and sewer, those are your typical largest share of your rate. So nothing atypical in the way your municipality would recover for the cost, and that's pretty consistent from municipality to municipality. I will note there's the green box at the bottom there, that the legislation as it stands today, unless anything on the bill passed during my commute here, the legislation still requires that the fully calculated rates be phased in over a 5-year period. That would be in effect until Bill 185 if it does repeal that section here. But that is under review, and so just as a cautionary note, things could change there, but that is the legislation as it is today. And then this graph does exclude the Northeast Master Plan area specific calculated charges that were already presented, and that DC document is out for public consultation too. So that being said, that is a very scoped area, but that would be in addition to this, any DCs applicable in that area. So just to compare the current versus calculated rates, just to Ashton's point earlier, the current rates that we have in the municipality are represented there, and the total service area is just about $23,500. The calculated rate, as I mentioned, is about $32,500, which would represent an increase of about 38% from the current rate that's enforced. What we do want to note, though, is further to the Treasurer's comments earlier, is that the municipality hasn't indexed the development charges since the bylaw was put in place, which just during that period we've seen the highest inflationary pressures or indexation in recent years, partly because of COVID. So what I've shown in just for representation purposes is the last column, which is the 2019 calculated rate, but if it were to be indexed to the current charge, which would have a rate of about $33,900. So it's very similar to the rate that we've calculated under this background study, at least at this point in time. So something to keep in mind in terms of when you get into the consideration of your bylaw, keeping up with the effects of inflation and keeping up with the indexation factors would, in some instances, offset some of the increase that we're seeing here today. So just to put those rates in context with some other comparing communities here, the graph would represent the upper and lower tier charges in place in other municipalities, and this is for a single detached dwelling unit. As mentioned, there's a couple caveats when you look at a rate comparison. One, the growth and infrastructure needs in each municipality is quite different, and we really have to consider the infrastructure needs in your particular community. Second to that is when we look at the comparison, some might be on different times of their bylaw, and some might also have been caught up in the 5-year phase-in by the province. So some of those rates imposed in other communities might not actually be representing the fully calculated rates in their background study. They might be on the scale up to that 5-year phase-in. So they might be discounted from the rates that we're seeing here. That being said, the current rates for in the listable area in North Perth would kind of fall to the low to middle end of the spectrum. You'll see the second arrow being the calculated rates for North Perth, which would put them on towards the middle to higher end of the spectrum, but quite comparable still with many of your communities, noting that some communities like Mapleton are in the midst of their background study process, which have seen a much higher rate increase, and some other municipalities on that list in between you, like Kincardine, they're going to be up for renewal next year, and Woodstock, which is also kind of right under you, they're caught up in the 5-year phase-in, so they'll be ramping up to the fully calculated rate in a couple of years, unless there's changes to the legislation, which might get them higher sooner. On the non-residential side, the fully calculated rate is $77.59 per square meter. One note that here on the non-residential side, same pie graph, it would show the distribution of that rate to each of the individual categories of service. Non-residential does not have a charge for things such as parks and recreation or library, so the charge is redistributed, or the weighting of the charge is distributed to the other hard services of roads, water, and sewer. Same caveat applies in the legislation with the 5-year renewal, with the 5-year phase-in. So just on the non-residential side, in terms of the fully calculated rates, we have a comparison of current versus calculated, recognizing that the current rate in North Perth is heavily discounted. The non-residential charge for your general services currently does not have a rate, and then your hard services of water and sewer were also discounted at the time of the last study. So the rate increase here of 218% is much more profound, largely because the rates that are shown are discounted as a way of council discretion at the time of the 2019 DC study. The other column here is the same one as the 2019 one on the far right, which would represent the fully calculated rate back in 2019 and then adjusted for the effects of the index. But again, the rate itself doesn't have much value here because the rate was already discounted to start with, and the indexation on top of that would just make that gap much more wider, but it is there for your information purposes. So just to put the rate comparison for your commercial development for a per square meter into context, you currently fall on the lower end of the spectrum for commercial development on the non-residential side. The fully calculated rates would still put you towards the low to middle end of the spectrum and much lower than many other communities. And that's just a policy decision that council will have to make again during this bylaw period if you want to continue those discounts or any modifications to that for both commercial and industrial development or any other non-residential development forms. So that brings me to kind of my last slide here on our DC bylaw policy considerations. Nothing for council's decision today, but your current bylaw does have a series of non-statutory exemptions and reductions, which will be put back on the table for your consideration in this next bylaw. You have reduced non-residential DCs, which means there's no charges for your general services and roads on the DC on the non-residential side. There's a 50% reduction for commercial DCs for most services less than 2,500 square feet. And then there's a further reduction for any industrial development than what we saw on that previous slide. There's an exemption for bona fide farms and reduced DCs for entry-level residential units to incentivize kind of entry-level homes into the market, which was on single families and multi-unit DCs in the last bylaw. And then we'll have to make a policy adjustment on the annual DC bylaw indexing, which we can adjust that in this forthcoming bylaw for your consideration. So just to kind of wrap up with our timelines here, we're holding this meeting today as a council information session. The background study is intended to be released publicly on the website on or before June 12th, which will kind of set the wheels in motion for the public consultation process. The public meeting in July with the bylaws being passed for consideration by council on August 12th, which would be in advance of your September 1st expiry of your bylaw. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening with me there.
All right. Nice to have you with us again.
Sorry?
Nice to have you with us
Yes,
again.
thank you.
For the work and the explanations. I just have a quick question maybe you can help with. The province had introduced a notion around sort of splitting DCs into a community benefits charge and a sort of core DC. Whatever came of that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So that was through the original processes 5 years ago when we were doing it. And the soft services, the general services, were going to be moved to the community benefits charge regime. But they did back off that idea. But they did introduce community benefits charges, but it's now only effectively a Section 37 replacement under the Planning Act for high-density bonusing. So only municipalities that are developing apartment buildings with 5 or more stories and 10 or more units would you be able to levy a community benefits charge. So the municipality can look to impose the CBC bylaw, and it could overlap with the DC, but none of your categories of service in your current bylaw would be removed. You can levy it on top, but it's only strictly related to those development forms. So no single detached multi-units would be eligible.
I recall in the day it being a source of some concern in terms of the work that might be involved in teasing things out. So it's good to hear that that's not quite the case anymore. Okay, other questions from colleagues? First comments on this, Councillor Nordum.
Thanks, and through you, Mayor Kiesenberg. So we're discussing this CIP. We look at the calculation from the current into calculated.
Mm-hmm.
Is our CIP kind of in that calculation? Like we're talking about maybe waiving some DCs on some affordable, attainable units. Is that in the calculation here, or would that affect it a fair bit?
So through the mayor, so the CIP or any discounts actually aren't in the calculations. If a municipality imposes a CIP program to exempt certain development types, that would be through that program, and it's still the rates that we see in the bylaw are still the rates that we would calculate, and any exemptions are separate from that. So it wouldn't impact the study process itself. It would be layered on in addition, and you would fund that program separately.
It would affect essentially the balance sheet of the corporation by issuing grants in lieu of those charges to the limits that were described by the consultants, right? So the municipality would be down money because of that sort of trade-off, for the sake of how I understand it, at least. Okay, other questions, comments on this matter? Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd and Council. Thanks very much for the presentation. On page 15 of your reports, the rate comparison, and whether it's on the residential or we look at the commercial, it is, I really appreciate the work that was done to give us those figures, because it really lets you see where we stand in relation to our neighbors. And the most telling feature for me is when we do have an upper tier that does have development charges, such as Waterloo Region, Wellington County, as well as, I guess, Bruce County and Oxford, as opposed to Perth County, as I understand it, has no DCs. So that, in effect, puts our DC rate significantly less than some of those others that, like the staggering one to me is 70,000 per residential unit in Wilmot is head and shoulders above anything that we would have here. So I appreciate that. That being said, what's being proposed here is still a significant increase, and I think when you, irrespective of all, look around at others, it is going to be a sticker shock for many of our current people that are in the process of both residential and commercial builds. So I think that phase-in period will be crucial for us as council to look at. So thanks very much, and we'll look for guidance on that. Thank you.
Can I ask, I mean, as I understand it, the province in current legislation has a 5-year phase-in. I assume what we're doing is we're trying to move to the new targets that are justified by the study. Is that fair? Like by year 5, we should hit that 32,000 number for single-family dwelling that you showed in here.
That is the way the legislation currently is. So you can only impose 80% of the calculated rate in year 1, and then moving up to 100% by year 5. But that is the specific proposal that is being looked at to be removed as part of Bill 185.
So in the absence of removing that, the municipal corporation still is sort of accumulating impacts down the road for the assumption of various infrastructure that these charges are for, and essentially accumulating a little bit of a debt as we go, right?
Correct.
Am I fair in making that assessment? So the fact that the province will remove or could remove through legislation, you don't know if it wears third reading today or not, could change that story for us, and yet, as Councillor Rothwell has pointed out, lead to significant sticker shock if it was applied all at once. Yet if we don't apply it at once, we're going to continue to sort of lose ground in reserves against the long-term infrastructure obligations of the municipality. Have I got that right?
That's correct.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I understood how that worked. Councillor Johnston.
I don't think that makes sense.
Oh. Well, borrow Deputy Mayor Kellum's mic. There we go.
Thank you. But carrying on with what you said, and you talked about it, but had we indexed in 2019, there wouldn't be the sticker shock today because we would already be actually above where we should be. So I'm assuming then we're definitely looking, and maybe this is to Ashton or to council, we're definitely looking at indexing this currently, when we implement this.
Going forward, yeah.
It does seem like it's the prudent thing to do, and the consultant has raised it as a point for us to consider, right? Makes sense given the numbers that were run to show us where we would have been. Hindsight being 2020, of course. CAO Snell?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we phased in the last one over the first 3 years of the bylaw. Wasn't a full 5-year implementation, but I certainly sort of agree with Councillor Johnson. If we index this one, we'll be in much better shape 5 years from now. I think the other thing that when we looked at this through talking to Hampson and talking among staff is we used to discount commercial property almost entirely in North Perth, and then last time we put on some of the harder services, water and sewer. I really think also too, we're missing the component of at least roads and some of the public works components of that. So even if council wants to consider some of the softer services, we really should take a good hard look at including roads into our commercial bylaw DC rates.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. I guess I was caught by a little bit of surprise with regards to the proportion in the residential development charge proposition that is attributed to parks and recreation. Did you want to comment on that? Like, how do we compare to other municipalities in terms of that chunk of the pie?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Generally, parks and recreation of the general services is usually the lion's share of the rate. So I wouldn't say you're disproportionately high there. That's pretty consistent. Parks and recreation needs in municipalities have really kind of increased and this would include expanding of indoor space as well as your outdoor amenities as well. So it would be both elements there, and I don't see from a proportional standpoint anything that's a concern on that front.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to check in on that. Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. So just further on that point about Parks and Recreation, I think this, again, these are on capital works proposals that we have in the coming future. So again, like we haven't got that whole list in front of us, but I mean, we do have some sizable projects on the Parks and Recreation side, including new parks, as well as the replacement of a pool in Listowel and other upgrades on our facilities. So as we found out with the sticker shock of a playground at some 300 and X thousand, it doesn't take long to all of a sudden get up to 30, whatever the number was, 31 million or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, fair point. Anyone else with questions or comments at this point? It does feel like we're facing a few whammies here, right? We've got the building fees and charges that we have to consider, and then we have development charges to consider. Yeah, it's a busy time for us as a council to make decisions about such things. I certainly recall, and I just wish to remind council and advise our new colleagues from this term, decisions that we made in the last term with regards to some incentivization, some discounting in the commercial and industrial envelope to try to stimulate growth in those sectors in a targeted way. If I understand things, and just nod your head here, your study justifies the maximum that we can charge, but we can, with discretion, charge less or create exemptions that allow for lower charges in certain targeted areas if we have development intentions. So, okay, thank you. Any other questions before we consider the resolution? Okay, seeing none, as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the Development Charges Study 2024 draft rates report for information purposes, and further that Council receives the presentation of Hempstead Consulting Limited regarding the draft rates for development charges background study and bylaw. Moved by Councillor Johnston, seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none. I'm going to say let's have that vote, but somehow my computer kicked me out, so maybe I better get back in here. Let's have that vote. There we go. Let's go. Somewhere.
I'm in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson records a manual in favor of voting. With that, that is carried. Mr. Marabella, nice to have you with us again. Thank you. I'm not sure we like the numbers, but it is what it is.
Thanks very much. Have a good night.
All right, colleagues, it's almost 9 o'clock. I think let's take a break till 9 o'clock just so that we can wring our shirts out and see if we can get the air conditioning in the chamber to improve somewhat. And we'll be back at 9. All right, we return from our break. The ventilation in the room has been adjusted and the temperature is slowly coming down, so I think we're appreciative of that. Let's turn now to item 9.2, reports from the Strategic Initiatives Department. As item 9.2.1, Council has before it a report from staff related to possible revisions to advisory committee membership in the interest of improving integration between the North Perth Agriculture and Agribusiness Advisory Committee and the North Perth Economic Development Advisory Committee. I'm going to call on Mr. Matt Cardiff. He's our agricultural specialist to address this matter. Mr. Cardiff, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg, and good evening, Council, and happy Ontario Local Food Week. So, if you didn't know it was, now you do. I'll try to keep this brief. This report is in response to the request for staff to address coordination and alignment between the Economic Development Advisory Committee and the Agricultural and Agribusiness Advisory Committee. As outlined in the report, there are several strategies and tools available to the respective committees and staff to ensure alignment and coordination of committee activities based on the current composition, through the sharing of meeting minutes, reports, and cross-delegations that would also support the sharing of information between committees when there is relevant topics discussed. As all meetings are public between NPEDAC and NPAC, if you want to call it that, either committee members from each committee could attend the other's meetings, and if needed in special circumstances, the Economic Development Committee or the Agriculture Committee could both form a joint working group of members composing of each for specific projects if deemed necessary. With that, I would turn it back to you, Mayor Kasenberg, for any questions or comments from Councillor yourself. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cardiff. Colleagues, any questions or first comments on this before we consider staff's recommendation? Okay, then I have a resolution as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives a report titled NPEDAC and NPAAC.
I should have done that to myself.
Alignment. You know, it's the heat. Thanks. Exactly, Deputy Mayor Cullen. It's the heat. Dated June 3rd, 2024, as information, and the Council directs staff to implement the alignment strategies described in this report for optimum coordination of NPEDAC and NPAAC. Call for a mover. Thanks, Councillor Duncan. Seconded by Councillor Richardson. Appreciate it. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have the vote. And that is carried. Wouldn't be the worst idea in the world if we figured out what good acronyms sounded like. Well, let's put it that way. Okay, next up are three items from the Development and Protective Services Department. Is item 9.3.1, Manager of Development and Protective Services Jenny Pape has brought forward a policy that addresses a possible future approach to adding names of deceased firefighters to the existing monument. I'm going to call on Chief Pape to walk us through this matter. Welcome, Chief Pape.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. Good evening, Council. In 2012, the North Perth Firefighter Monument Committee was established to create a monument in memory of fallen firefighters Kenneth Ray and Raymond Walter. At the time the monument was designed, the committee agreed that the design would allow for additional names to be added at a later date should an MPFD firefighter die due to active service or as the result of an occupational illness as recognized by WSIB. Although adding additional names to the monument is referenced in the meeting minutes of the committee, no formal policy was ever drafted. WSIB has recently approved a claim for a deceased NPFD firefighter, recognizing his passing as a line-of-duty death. As can be appreciated, the decisions about the monument may have an emotional impact on those connected to the 2011 tragedy. To consider the sensitive nature of such decisions, the attached policy has been drafted for Council's consideration. For Council's awareness, I did reach out to the Walter and Ray families last week to let them know that this was coming before Council. They did not voice any concerns. In drafting the policy, other jurisdictions with line-of-duty death monuments were consulted, and all of those jurisdictions don't differentiate between an active service death or an occupational illness death. the Ontario Fallen Firefighter Monument in Toronto, the Canadian Fallen Firefighters Monument in Ottawa also rely on WSIB approvals when considering applications. It's therefore recommended that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approve the North Perth Firefighter Monument Policy as attached to the report.
All right, colleagues, questions or first comments on this matter? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and thanks, Chief Pape, for the report. I really appreciate the care and compassion and respect that was given in the preparations for this. I'm certainly in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else at this point? Okay, then I have a resolution as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the North Perth Firefighter Monument Policy. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Richardson, thanks. Councillor Blazek will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you on that one, Chief Pape. She is not leaving the podium. Next up is item 9.3.2. Council has a report before it pertaining to policies and procedures in the fire department related to weekend on-call services. It certainly is an interesting report that reminds us of the challenges of recruitment, retention, and volunteer fire service. Chief Pape, back to you.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. More than 20 years ago, the North Perth Fire Department implemented a policy to maintain minimum staffing on weekends. Minimum staffing levels ensure response capabilities across our municipality and protect the health and safety of responding personnel. Weekend squad sizes range from 3 to 6 personnel per station, depending on the size of the station roster at any given time. A full-strength complement across the department would allow for 5 to 7 personnel per squad per station. This policy is one of several eligibility requirements that members agree to upon hire. More recently, the policy has been cited as a retention issue for volunteer firefighting personnel. Based on the issues raised, Chief Pape inquired through the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs about on-call requirements of other volunteer fire services in the province. Responses were varied, with some jurisdictions using the same model as North Perth's current 52 weekend model, others using reduced model, and others with no weekend on-call requirements at all. Using the information gathered, a survey with 2 options was sent out to all NPFD volunteer firefighters. The first option was a reduced model, providing minimum staffing from the May long weekend to the Labor Day long weekend only. The second option was to retain the existing weekend on-call policy. We received 44 responses to the survey. 19 of those respondents, or 43% who responded, voted to reduce the weekend on-call requirements, while 25 respondents, or 56%, voted to keep it at status quo. 2 sets of data were considered as part of this report. The average number of responding personnel is consistent across both a 3 and a 5-year time period. An analysis of fire department response for fire calls was also conducted, as we need more personnel for fire calls than any other calls that we respond to. Historically, across both study periods, fire call volumes is greatest on Mondays, lowest on Tuesdays, and consistent the rest of the week, suggesting our response capabilities require consistency 7 days of the week. With the current model having been in place for such a long period of time, there's no real method by which to evaluate whether the number of responding personnel would change if the weekend on-call policy was revised or eliminated. However, anecdotal evidence indicates that jurisdictions without weekend on-call requirements struggle routinely, and those are some of our neighbours who are struggling with staffing shortages on weekends and holidays. We also received feedback from individual firefighters. The concern themes were that current weekend on-call requirements are a deterrent to recruitment of new members and retention of existing experienced members. Concerns that without sufficient staffing on weekends, the safety of responding personnel could be jeopardized. There are a number of tasks that need to be performed quickly on a scene, and without the right number of people to do that, that could be problematic. Concern that reducing the weekend on-call requirements to summer months reduces the level of fire protection services to the community the rest of the year. And a request to consider reducing weekend on-call requirements for the Listowel station only. Recruitment and retention of volunteer firefighters is an issue facing municipalities across our country. The MPFD has been successful in recruiting in recent years. However, retention has been a challenge for a variety of reasons, including current weekend on-call requirements. While this feedback has been considered, the majority of survey respondents voted in favor of keeping the current weekend on-call policy, and our historic call data indicates a need for consistent number of responding personnel 7 days of the week. Personnel and community safety must always be the priority of any first response agency, and therefore it is recommended that the weekend on-call policy remain in effect. MPFD administration will continue to look for additional opportunities to improve retention amongst our volunteer firefighting roster, including the compensation study currently being undertaken by this municipality. The study is expected to present both financial and in-kind methods of compensation intended to demonstrate appreciation for the role that volunteer firefighters play within our community. Happy to answer questions you may have at this time.
All right, thanks, Chief Pape. Questions, first comments. Let's go with Councillor Johnson first, Councillor Blazek next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief Pape. So the jurisdictions that don't have a weekend on-call policy, so when the alarm goes, it's just whoever can?
Yes, it really is whoever shows up.
So it could be 2.
Recently, there was a large industrial fire. There were 3 who responded.
Well, someone that's lived through a fire, my fire was on a Wednesday, but I'm very much in favor of keeping the on-call policy because I like to know that there's at least enough there that will answer the call. And it's not the same, but my wife has been on call our whole married career, and as a farmer with young kids, it was a pain in the rear end to all of a sudden have 1 to 3 kids in the tractor with me, in the barn with me when I went. But we made do. It was part of her job. And unfortunately, I think that, I know they're volunteers and I know they're trained, and we had to keep them trained, and we gotta look after these guys, ladies, gentlemen. But it's also just crucial that we have somebody available when the bell goes off. So I'm all in favor of keeping it. Thank you.
All right, next is Councillor Blazek.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, Jenny. Does the policy permit for individual firefighters to switch on all weekends? You're already nodding.
It absolutely does.
Thank you.
So the policy right now allows for firefighters in our rural stations or Atwood and Moncton stations to come into Listowel for what we deem the necessities of life. So if they need to come in to run a kid to hockey, if they need to come in and purchase groceries, run to Canadian Tire, they're able to do that. The deal is that if you can't perform your weekend on duty, that you find an alternative person to take that on. They should be of the same rank. So we can't have a firefighter filling in for a captain. Those are different ranks. But that is and always has been permitted. It's a station level. Administration has never gotten into this switching business. That's always been amongst our personnel to make those switches happen.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anstead, did I see Councillor Richardson, your hand up too, or no? Oh, okay. Councillor Anstead is next.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. Through. Thanks, Chief Pape, for your presentation. I just want to go back to the chart, and I apologize if I've missed it. This chart, number of responding personnel, that's the average of firefighters that have responded to calls.
Yes.
And I apologize if I missed it. Is it listed in the report how many people we need to go out on a call or to run a truck?
It depends on the call. So a house fire, for instance, and I don't have that number handy, but I could send you that information. There are certain NFPA standards. We have not, as a municipality, adopted those service standards. We are a volunteer department, and there is that understanding that we are a volunteer department. The establishing and regulating bylaw is written that we are a volunteer department. So we cannot always guarantee said response. But there are NFPA standards that do deal with that. Whereas many of our calls now, especially in the Listowel ward, are medical in nature, and we're going to assist ambulance or we're called off before we actually even arrive at the address. That's the majority of our calls, followed closely by motor vehicle collisions, where we would not need as many personnel as we would for a house fire. So it really does depend.
Just secondary or supplemental, if I could, Mayor Kasenberg. Okay, so thank you for that, Chief Pape. So I know you mentioned with Councillor Johnson's, the industrial fire you'd mentioned. How many, do we have a number of how many times we haven't had adequate staff that have attended? Roughly, if we had that?
I don't want to say we have run into that yet.
Okay.
We always have the opportunity to call mutual aid assistance, so our neighbors. We have very close and strong relationships with our neighbors in Minto, Perth East, West Perth, over into Huron East. So if we do find that we are running short, we can call mutual aid. However, it is the responsibility of a municipality to provide fire protection services. We cannot rely on our neighbors. That would be a misuse of the mutual aid system. The same as if they were calling us all the time to provide fire protection, that would be a misuse of the mutual aid agreement.
Thank you.
The industrial fire, just to go back to that, the industrial fire was not in this jurisdiction, it was in a neighboring jurisdiction. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Gordon, did I see your hand up earlier? Okay. Anyone else with questions or first comments about this? This is one of those challenging circumstances, certainly, and so we have a recommendation that is rooted in data from a survey conducted in the department itself. It's not clear cut. You know, when you look at the data, there's sort of a saw-off between the options here, and there could still be consequences. But the recommendation I have before us is as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth continues to endorse the existing weekend on-call policy as an approved level of service for the community. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Gordon, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Rothwell. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's turn to item 9.3.3. In this one, Council is presented with a report which it requested on the subject matter of part lot control exemption fee extensions stemming from an unusual case that sparked the realization that perhaps a little bit of policy was lacking. I believe we have Mr. Garland from the county. He's a planner who works on North Perth files remotely tonight to present this report, which proposes an approach to close the policy gap and charge a fee for extensions. If Ms. Carter has this ready, then let's have that on the... Mr. Garland, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening, Council. Mayor Kasenberg, thank you for allowing me to attend virtually. This report is a request of Council as of the April 8th Council meeting to report back on the request for part lot control extensions. There was a couple of part lot control files which had expired previously, and they had requested to be renewed or reapplied for. Currently, the fees requested were a request for a reduction, and staff were directed to bring back a supplemental report. So this is that supplemental report. I would ask maybe just, that's perfect. So as part of the review, staff did review a number of the part lot control fees of the neighboring municipalities and counties and municipalities. That fee review is in front of you in that chart. The fees range widely, to be quite honest. They range from $3,400 in, say, Kitchener area, all the way down to $400 in Wellesley. What I do want to point out for Council's attention is the per lot fee charged in addition to the initial base application. That was a little bit higher. Actually, that's quite high. We were on the high end of things for that, so that's $700. So Council or staff did look at the consideration for a new fee schedule for that to more align with those fees being charged. So what we are asking for Council's consideration tonight is a new fee schedule, one that would reflect both the County of Perth fees as well as a potential new application or schedule for North Perth. We've also given a breakdown example of the current fee structure as well as the proposed fee structures. The majority of the part lot control application fees are charged under the smaller or individual, say, semi-type developments that are happening, with subsequently a few larger applications applied further on. There definitely is a fee benefit with the larger applications. So the more units you're applying for, the more of a fee you're reducing. However, it's roughly the equivalent same amount of work that goes into the report, just a slight extension. So staff have pulled together the report for the requests. The new fee would be $2,000 base fee for an initial application, and then subsequently $150 per lot after that. The renewal option would be $500 for the base fee and then $150 for that as well too. And we've put forward a number of recommendations and requests for council to consider both the amendment for the new fee as well as the revision for the part lot control extension. And in addition to that, staff have also discussed it both with the treasurer and the CBO as well too for their comments. So I'm happy to address or answer any comments at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Garland. Colleagues, questions, first comments on this? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor, through you. Thanks very much, Nathan, for the report. Just you mentioned about the county fee as well, in addition to the North Perth fee. Is the county undertaking a review of this as well?
Not to my knowledge, they had previously done an inclusion of it. Currently, the county fee is not being charged. However, that is, I should correct myself. My understanding is they are looking at potentially charging this fee, but not amending this fee. So I don't believe they're charging this fee currently to the member municipalities. However, they may be looking at bringing this fee to collect it. That's why the slightly higher initial fee of the base application is being brought forward.
Thank you very much. I think on that basis, I'm fully in support because in our situation, county planning staff are doing the work at the local level and the county level. So I think the proposed fee is in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rothwell. Any other first comments, questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I have a resolution then for our consideration as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the report from the planner entitled Planning Report Part Lot Control Renewal Fee for Information, and that Council approves adding the line Part Lot Control Exemption Bylaw Renewal to Schedule B Development and Protective Services Fees of Bylaw 138-2023, and that the fee be $500 plus $150 per conveyable parcel created over 2 parcels from the original block for renewals extensions which conform with the existing zoning. I think there's a typo here in my resolution. And that the part lot control exemption bylaw fee be updated in Schedule B of the Development and Protective Services Bylaw 138-2023 to be $2,000 plus $150 per conveyable parcel created over 2 parcels from the original block, and that the new renewal fee schedule be applied to all applications approved as of January 1st, 2024, and any refunds be provided accordingly. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Andreessen, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Duncan, thanks. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Garland, as always. We turn our attention now to item 9.4 on our agenda, reports from the Operations Department. As item 9.4.1, staff has provided a recommendation to proceed with the request for the extension of Drain 59 Branch B under Section 4 of the Drainage Act and to appoint an engineer. I see Scott Richardson, our Drainage Superintendent, standing at the podium. Mr. Richardson, welcome. And I have a question. Why is this drain numbered and not named? We have many, many named drains.
Yeah, you get up in the Vento and they're all numbered. It's a little bit more confusing there, but no, I appreciate you guys taking the time tonight. Mayor and Council, the purpose of this report is to consider a Section 4 under the Drainage Act for Drain 59 Branch B. Drain provides outlets for the three municipalities, Mapleton, North Perth, and Minto. The drain was originally constructed in 1964 under a report prepared by James Howes. Drain was rebuilt again in 1981 under a report prepared by W.E. Kelly and Associates, and recently in 2019 by Spree. The request for Section 4 of the Drainage Act was received on April 23rd, 2024. A new 7.5 acre lot was severed off of Lot 1 Concession 13 in Wallace. The owner requires a new lot for stormwater management, for a new outlet for their stormwater management pond. Therefore, a 75 meter extension of Drain 59 Branch B will provide this necessary outlet. And again, municipal drains are designed to OMAFR's 1.5 inch drain coefficient, meaning the drains can accommodate 1.5 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour time period. The stormwater management design will need to account for the agriculture design and be required to throttle back to that 1.5 inch contribution. That'll be all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Richardson. Maybe we should propose we name it the Richardson Drain. I don't know. Feel good
That's
about
not
that?
a bad idea.
Gotcha. All right. Colleagues, questions or first comments? Councillor Duncan, go ahead.
I'll move the motion.
Okay, Councillor Duncan wants to move forward here. So let me get the resolution read into the record here as follows. The Council of the Municipality of North Perth, in accordance with Section 4 of the Drainage Act, proceeds with the request for the extension of Drain 59 Branch B, and further that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth appoints Spree Associates to investigate, design, and prepare a report for extension of Drain 59 Branch B. Moved by Councillor Duncan, seconded by Councillor Johnston. Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have the vote. And that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you.
Next up are items from the Environmental Services Department. In item 9.5.1, Council is presented with a draft of the 2023 North Perth Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan, something that warrants an annual submission to the Province of Ontario. North Perth's Manager of Environmental Services, Mark Hackett, will address the matter. Mr. Hackett, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg and Council. I think I'll just jump right into the report. Reg 507/18 is created under the Electricity Act of 1998 and requires that all municipalities and others have to update their previous energy conservation and demand management plans from 2019 and then every 5 years thereafter. So the intent of these plans is to look at your energy use during the reporting year, which is 2023, describe any of our efforts made to be more energy efficient during the reporting period, which is a 5-year period, and then also to set objectives for greenhouse gas emissions reductions in the future. So the previous plan was completed by our climate change coordinator at the time, and it documented our energy use for 2018. It was received by Council in 2019 and then submitted to the province as required. So the attached 2024 North Perth Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan, that's the last time I'll say the whole thing, I'm just going to call it the plan, in interest of time. It does fulfill the requirements of Reg 507. It outlines our greenhouse gas emissions from our facilities, streetlights, and fleet, while also detailing any offsets to emissions, including renewable energy generation, tree planting program, and other opportunities for future reductions to emissions. So if we look at the attached plan, there's a brief introduction, and then a review of the requirements of Reg 507, which I just spoke to. And there's also a statement of the validity period of the plan, which runs from July 1st of 2024 to June 30th of 2029. There's also a commitment to greenhouse gas reductions. North Perth has been prioritizing carbon footprint reduction for more than a decade through several initiatives and such plans such as the Carbon Footprint Reduction and Compensation Strategy, the Carbon Footprint Initiative, and also the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan. So as a member of the Carbon Footprint Initiative, North Perth committed to a 25% reduction of carbon emissions by 2025 using 2015 as a baseline year. And as of December 31st of 2023, North Perth has reduced carbon emissions by 12.6% from 2015 through the reduction of energy consumption, investing in energy efficient and renewable projects, and carbon offset projects. So this leads us to section 1 of the report called the Annual Energy Consumption and Emissions, which basically looks at all the data that's been collected over the last number of years and tells us how we performed in 2023. So Table 1 outlines the 33 municipal facilities that are reporting under this document, and they're related to the operations, so such things as admin offices, council chambers, libraries, water wells, wastewater pump stations, wastewater treatment plant, public works buildings where vehicles are stored, rec facilities, things like that. So that outlines all of them, gives you a bit of information about each of them. And then Table 2, we're now talking about the facilities portion. It outlines the 2023 total fuel consumption in buildings and facilities, while Table 3 and 4 coming after that have more site-specific information. So North Perth uses various fuels. We use electricity, natural gas, propane, and furnace fuel. And the emission factors for these are included in the appendices of the plan. I'll speak a bit more about that in a moment. So our North Perth goals and objectives for conserving and managing energy demand are challenging to meet our community's rapidly expanding and subsequent requirement to provide added services. For example, the recent upgrades at the wastewater treatment plant, an additional pump station as part of the NEMP, additional streetlights, as well as a satellite municipal office. All of these were not included in the 2018 emissions calculations because they didn't exist at the time. So it should be noted that the 2019 plan had energy consumption totals that did not include water wells and pump stations, but I have included them in the 2024 plan. So moving to Figure 1, a comparison of energy consumption from 2018 to 2023, we can see that our kilowatt hours for electricity actually from 2018 to 2023 increased by a substantial amount. But I should be noted here that the wastewater treatment plant upgrades alone accounted for over 100% of that growth, of that extra energy usage. So if you look at that a little bit closer, and if the increase in hydro consumption resulting from those upgrades was omitted solely for data analysis purposes, the electricity of all other 32 municipal facilities actually went down by 2.1%. So then we can look at our fleet. We have a large fleet. We have 38 vehicles that use diesel and 24 that use gasoline. We also have three propane-powered ice resurfacers. And this is another important part, that emission factors for vehicles are included in the appendices, and it's important to note that when you compare those emission factors to electricity, the vehicle emissions factors for the vehicles is much higher than what it is for electricity. So a summary of the fleet fuel consumption is included in Table 5, and a detailed listing of the fleet vehicles and all their information is included in the appendices as well. When you compare 2018 vehicle emissions to 2023, we actually have been able to reduce those emissions by 6.2%. This could possibly be attributed to the annual use fluctuations based on the type of winters we experience, how much more plowing we're doing and work like that. Looking at streetlights, North Perth has converted LED streetlights to LED streetlights in 2015, and we continue to see a 54% reduction in emissions and electricity from 2015, despite having added the number of streetlights that we have added in that time. Looking at water and wastewater, Table 7 compares 2018 and 2023 electricity, natural gas, and also treatment emissions were included this time for methane and nitrous oxide, which were not included in the previous plan. So with continued growth in the communities of Atwood and listable future upgrades at the wastewater treatment plant will be necessary at some point in the future, which will again add to our electricity demand. I also wanted to note here that the wastewater treatment plant accounts for 62% of all the electricity in all of our facilities. So as we did a tour there a couple weeks ago, you can see a lot of that equipment that uses a lot of hydro, and it's going to use more in the future. So it's something to be considered. So that finally gets us to our total greenhouse gas emissions for 2023, and they're outlined in Table 8. So there's a little graph just above to the side there that shows that 15.2% of our total greenhouse gas emissions were from wastewater and water treatment, 46% for facilities, 38% for fleet, and just under 1% for streetlights. So if you add that all together, our total emissions, including carbon offsets from our tree planting program, have been reduced by 11.83% since 2018. That leads us to section 2 of that, which is our conservation strategies, which looks at how did we achieve these reductions that we have been able to achieve. So we have renewable energy generation. So our solar installation at the Steve Kerr Memorial Complex. And if you look at that picture, I'd never seen from above before. I thought that was kind of a neat picture that shows all those panels, because you can't see it from anywhere else but a picture like this. But anyway, it's offset our electricity use at all of our facilities together by 4.8%, or 332,000 kilowatt hours in 2023 alone. And since installation in 2018, these panels have saved over $521,000 in electricity costs and reduced our carbon emissions by over 169,000 kilograms. We also have a tree planting program. North Perth has a tree cover percentage of just under 9.5%, and 39% of the woodlots in North Perth include standing deadwood, which is mainly caused by invasive species. We have invested in tree planting not only to improve our carbon footprint, but also to help rebuild the resiliency of those forests within our municipality. So since 2015, with the assistance of a number of community partners, North Perth has planted close to 14,000 trees and shrubs. And if we were to assume a 75% survival rating, the tree planting program has sequestered more than 179,000 kilograms of carbon. Finally, we have a lighting retrofit program that's included in Table 8. There's a number of locations that have had a conversion from fluorescent to LED lighting, and that's reduced emissions by almost 2,400 kilograms per year. And we'll also note that the Listowel Fire Hall truck bay is scheduled to go to LED lighting sometime here in 2024. That leads us to our final section, Section 3, reduction strategies. So what can we do moving forward? So we have an environmental sustainability plan. Our 2021 greenhouse gas reduction plan is being updated this year, and it'll be updated as an environmental sustainability plan that will set goals and targets, such as overall emissions reductions to meet federal and provincial targets in 2030 and 2050. We're also looking at a climate lens of capital investment, where we'll look at developing a more formalized climate lens on procurement policy and capital investments. We'll look at amending procurement policy to incorporate energy efficiencies into the criteria we use for selection and evaluation of equipment and supplies. We'll also look at solar array expansion, where we'll look at considering potential solar array installations on existing buildings if feasible, and also on new projects in the future. We're also looking at passive vegetative heating and cooling, which involves strategic placement of vegetation like trees and things to lower heating and cooling costs in our facilities as well. And finally, looking at emissions reduction in our fleet. We looked at increasing the number of electric and hybrid vehicles in the future. We want to develop a procurement strategy to ensure that electric vehicles are considered when fleet replacements are scheduled. So, for example, over the next 5-year period, there are 10 light-duty trucks scheduled to be replaced. And if some of those were to be replaced with hybrid or fully electric vehicles, emissions from fleet could be significantly reduced. We want to continue with installing charging infrastructure at relevant facilities to allow potential conversion to more electric and hybrid vehicles, and also to continue installing public charging stations for that infrastructure to be built up as well for the future. So that leads us finally to our greenhouse gas reduction 2029 target. Our overall reduction of emissions from 2018 to 2023 was 11.68%. And during the next 5-year period, North Perth will endeavour to achieve a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, including offsets, of 30% from 2018 levels by 2029, which will align with the goals set out in the 2021 Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan, and also with provincial and federal reduction goals. So there's a lot of information in that report. There's a lot of data. A lot of people helped me gather all that data. It took quite a while, but I think overall, we're standing fairly well. I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hackett. Looks like Councillor Andreessen's up first.
Isenberg, and thank you for your presentation. I appreciated your idea around additional solar arrays on different buildings here in North Perth. I wondered about the consideration of an array at the wastewater treatment facility, given the fact that it really likes its energy.
It sure does, and through you, Mayor Kasenberg. We actually had a study done a number of years ago, and a proposal was made, and we applied for funding and didn't receive it, and it just sort of died at that point. So I think there's potential there. We do have land right beside that could house a solar array, and I think that's something. There was some funding information came out just today that the mayor forwarded to me, and I think there's some opportunities there to maybe put something together, because we have a lot of the information already of the kind of benefits you could get, and I'm sure. I'm not sure. It might have been 8 or 10 years ago. So I'm sure maybe the costs are a little bit different now too. So it might be more feasible.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Andreessen. Yes, there was an announcement, I think through the feds, if I'm not mistaken, but it was through an arm. I think through FCM, if I'm not mistaken, that there's some funding available for these kinds of projects. Came through the news today. So other questions, first comments? Councillor Blazek?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Thank you for your report, Mark. You said that there was an approximate monetary savings of $520-some thousand from the solar panels on the arena. And I was not here when those were put on. Do you happen to know? Obviously, there are non-monetary benefits to solar panels, but do you happen to know the cost of those panels on the Steve car?
Unfortunately, I do not know what the cost was at the time. I know they have a really neat website that I get that information off that can show you up to date. I could have updated that number today. I don't know, Chris, if you would have any information on that.
CEO Snow.
I could get the exact cost, but I believe it was around the $600,000 mark. There was a payback period of about 7.5 years to pay the solar panels back. We certainly seem to be on target to meet the payback timeline, but I won't get the exact number.
Okay, anyone else with questions? Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. Thank you, Mark, for the report. I note, obviously, that our garbage and recycling are not part of our municipal operations, but technically, I guess they are because we contract that service, right? So I'm not saying it's, you could almost put an asterisk to say that it's part of it, but you can't compare it because it wasn't included before. But I will say, as your representative of Blue Water Recycling Association, by the end of this year, almost all of the trucks in the Blue Water Recycling Association's fleet will be compressed natural gas and renewable natural gas, which is significant savings both on the greenhouse gas emissions as well as the cost perspective. So I know you're in good communications with Francis Villa, our president, and in terms of significant change in terms of operations, both environmentally as well as economically, the compressed natural gas is a significant saver both environmentally and economically. So thanks very much for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I have a resolution. Oh, CEO Snow, please.
I'd just like to make one comment. Mark mentioned it in a couple times through the report, but I think the one thing that's a struggle for us, both looking back at even the carbon footprint initiative and even doing this, is that certainly from 2019 to 2024, we also experienced some of the most rapid growth this community has ever had, and our population's up probably some 25 to 30%, and yet we still haven't been able to reduce our carbon emissions. But it is that tricky balance of we're actually servicing more people now than we were in 2019, and it really doesn't get reflected in the study. So it's a challenge to kind of weigh both those options.
Certainly fair. Thank you for raising that. Of course, this doesn't address the community at large, right? This addresses municipal operations. And it's important to realize that there's a lot more that's happening out in our community in individual homes and families with regards to greenhouse gas reduction or lack thereof. And we don't really fully understand that all that well at this point, but certainly I have continuing interest in seeing change in my own practices and certainly in our community on the macroscopic view. Okay, I have a resolution then as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the 2024 North Perth Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan as information and directs staff to submit the plan to the Province of Ontario to fulfill requirements of OREG 507-18. Can I call it? Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kellen will be our mover, seconded by Councillor Anstead. Thanks. Any discussion or debate on this? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Next up, Mr. Hackett remains in the hot seat here. This item 9.5.2, Council is invited to award a contract pursuant to a process properly conducted in accordance with our procurement bylaw for the rehabilitation of existing trunk sewer maintenance holes. The proposed contractor selected by staff is GFL Environmental Services, and the contract value is up to $285,000, excluding taxes. Mr. Hackett, you're up again.
Yeah, so the existing sanitary trunk main in Listowel conveys raw sewage to Highway 23 pump station, which then gets pumped out to the wastewater treatment plant. It was originally installed in around 1969. Groundwater infiltration has been an issue with corresponding high flows that we experience at the wastewater treatment plant when we have rain events. We did do a condition assessment in 2023 that concluded that the piping itself was in fair to good shape, but that the maintenance hole structures were in need of repair. Hence, we put out an RFP. We did have the 3 bids. We budgeted $175,000 for this job. All 3 bids that came in were substantially above the budgeted amount. So that the best bid that we had, and it was also the winning bid based on the other criteria that we're looking at, was $110,000 over the approved budget. So when reviewing the project, staff determined that the best approach originally was to issue this RFP because there were so many different methods that could be used to do these repairs or replace them even. And as the method was unknown, the estimated budget at the time was really our best guess in conjunction with our contract engineers. So with the continued growth forecast for the municipality, reducing infiltration will lessen hydraulic demand at the wastewater treatment plant. This project will also illustrate to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks that the municipality is committed to reducing infiltration, which will be taken into consideration when application is made to increase the hydraulic capacity at the plant. And so the additional capital funds for this project would come from wastewater reserves. So I could take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hackett. Questions or first comments? Councillor Duncan, let me get your microphone here. There we go.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Mark, do they have to reroute the main then to perform that work on those holes?
Nope, they will be able to work on it while it's live. They'll go right into the manhole. The procedure will involve drilling a number of holes all around into the concrete that's there already for the manhole, and then they actually inject material in that goes and will fill the outside barrier, and then there's an interior spray that goes on. It's almost like a concrete that gets sprayed on. So they'll be able to do all 13 of those in the exact same method, which should seal it for many, many years to come.
Cool. All right. Anyone else with questions or first comments? Seeing none, I have a resolution as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth awards request for proposal NP-022-24P, rehabilitation of existing trunk sewer maintenance holes, to GFL Environmental Services, Inc., Mississauga, Ontario, for the amount of up to $285,000 excluding taxes. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Richardson, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Blazek, thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Mr. Hackett, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work here. That brings us to agenda item number 10. Councillors, are there any reports that you would like to ask of staff or of our committees? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. I'm wondering if council would consider supporting a request for a report through our Public Works in conjunction with the county's Public Works. I see there's signs posted regarding Perth Line 86 and the reconstruction this summer. And I'm wondering if we could get a report so this council and our community is aware in terms of the impact that will have in terms of use of the highway during that period. As we all know, it's our busiest road in our community and transports people back and forth all over the place. So in terms of the length of the construction as well as any detours that will be happening, I think that would be helpful for our community, and perhaps our local media will pick that up and educate our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just check in with Mr. Couch. Maybe I see him sitting back there quietly, minding his business. Do we tend to cover or point people to construction projects that are undertaken by the county within our boundaries on our construction page at the website, out of curiosity?
We haven't provided that type of information. We could provide a link to county information on our site that would direct them there. I could talk to our communications personnel to do that. I'm trying to remember I don't recall a project that was directly adjacent to our municipality that was on the county roads other than the ones we conducted on Road 23 with the roundabout. And we did share some information at that time. Okay. So I could provide information to the communications group and add an adjacent project.
And does the county provide you with courtesy information directly about these projects as they're being maintained in our community?
Actually, I would say that we have not received adjacent municipal project information as a courtesy from any lower or upper tier municipalities.
Okay. Is there an opportunity for us to comment on this?
Mm-hmm. It could be beneficial if traffic is impacted entering our boundaries. So I'll find the limits of their project and the timing, and then I can coordinate communication with them.
Sounds desirable.
Mm-hmm.
Real pretty please kind of stuff. Might be successful. I don't know. Do you think we need a resolution in any way, shape, or form on this one, CAO Snell?
I don't think we need a resolution. Certainly, I think, unfortunately, more often than not, the lower tiers are the last to find out the information, but that's not a new trend. And quite often, I'm not sure the province or the upper tiers do a good job of communicating the information, because typically we're the ones that have to deal with the headaches of the rerouting of traffic. But we can pass it along and see if we can improve that communication process.
I mean, to speak to Councillor Rothwell's specific request as well, we should ask the county for information about that project and what it has modeled, if anything, with regards to traffic congestion problems that will emerge during its resurfacing program. I think, is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. Anything else from staff on this one? Mr. Couch, you're conferring there. Do you have any more parting comments?
No, we can work towards getting better information out for our local constituents, certainly.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks. Anyone else with requests on reports tonight? Okay, let's move to item 11. We don't have any additional items of correspondence tonight for our consideration, so that means we can turn to a consideration of bylaws. Tonight we have for our consideration a total of 2 bylaws. The enabling resolution outlines each bylaw and for each bylaw the number and the purpose. Before I read the resolution for passing these bylaws, does any councillor wish to extract one or more of them for a fulsome consideration or an individual recorded vote? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So we have a resolution as follows: to enable these bylaws, that the following bylaws are hereby passed: 39-2024 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 4-2022, and 45-2024 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 138-2023. That's related to fees. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Richardson, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Johnston. Any discussion or debate on these? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Let's move to item 13. Anyone wishing leave to give notice of motion tonight? Not seeing anything there. Let's move to 14. 14 is our opportunity to hear announcements that are to the benefit of our community or that reflect well on the community. Anyone have anything to raise this evening? Not seeing anything at the moment. Let's turn to item 15 on our agenda then. We have 2 items to be considered in a closed session meeting of council. I will now read that resolution that allows us to go into closed session with general purpose. Council proceeds in camera at 9:56 p.m. to address a matter pertaining to the following: a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board regarding Boyne Avenue, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board regarding concession 2, part lot 24, municipality of North Perth. Can I call for a mover? Thank you, Councillor Anstead. Seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. I'm going to make adjustments in the audiovisual settings in the room, and we'll be back in a moment. That one. And that one. And that one. And we need a test to see if we're streaming on YouTube. Councillor Richardson, thank you. We're good. All right. Thank you. Let's turn to item 16 on our agenda. As we've exited from our closed session meeting, Council did discuss the matters that were identified in our enabling resolution for closed session meeting of Council and did give staff direction pertaining to the matters, the essence of which will remain confidential at this time for the reasons that were stipulated in our enablement of closed session. Council has a mandated good practice acts near the end of its meeting agenda to confirm all of its actions and business of its meeting through what is called the confirmatory bylaw. I have an enabling resolution for that bylaw as follows: that bylaw 46-2024, being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, is hereby passed. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Rothwell, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Anstett. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried, and that means we've hit the magic moment. Councillors, we've completed the deliberation and taken action on the business that came before us tonight. I have a resolution for adjournment for our consideration as follows: that the council meeting adjourns at 10:18 p.m. to meet again for general council business on Monday, June 17th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Moved by Councillor Johnston. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Andreessen. It's not debatable. Let's have a vote. And that is carried. Colleagues, we meet again on Monday, June 17th. Until that time, this meeting is adjourned.